All right. Welcome, everybody. Saturday night, walking with your shadows. So this is an exciting program that I've put together. This is about what, where, why why, and where we have our shadows and what we do with them. So if you've ever wondered where your challenges come from in life, where your imposter syndrome, where your limiting beliefs, where you're pretty much anything that's stopping you be authentic, it sits in your shadows. So, what are our shadows? Start off. What are our shadows? Our shadows are things that we've suppressed, we deny, we disown. Events happen in our lives, and rather than work through them, they're too much for us. Whether they're emotional events that are too traumatic, whether they're events that just we can't deal with. We block them out. We suppress them, we deny that they happen, we push them down beneath all this stuff. They say that time heals all wounds. What a load of crap. Time doesn't heal all wounds. What time does is it puts layers on that event so that we we disconnect from it, we disassociate from it. So our shadows are the events that have affected our character that we no longer recognize consciously. Now, you've heard about 90% of our communications non-verbal. These are our shadows. These are the things, the information that's coming out from our unconscious. We don't consciously know we're doing it. We don't consciously know that we're shaking our head the wrong way, that we're holding ourselves a certain way, that our hands are moving around, that we're all sorts of non-verbal communication comes out that our unconscious is trying to express that we're not consciously aware of. Non-verbal communication. That doesn't mean just not the words, it's the actions, it's the behaviors, it's the coughs, it's the nuances of all the information that comes out in all sorts of different ways. One of the ways that our shadow shows up is the fact that we project our thoughts and feelings onto other people and we see them in other people. We don't see them in ourselves. So we see somebody we don't like. It's not them. The world's a mirror. It's actually something within ourselves that we're denying. And the way that our unconscious is expressing it is projecting onto another person. So you can see that these shadows that we've suppressed, we denied, they've shaped our character and they become our biggest problems. But first of all, let's have a look at where they originated from. Yeah, yes, we've suppressed, we denied them, we pretend that they're not happening. But what caused these things to be suppressed? What caused these? Where did these events come from in our lives? So where do they come from? And this is the fascinating part of doing shadow work because as a shadow coach, one never knows where these uh suppressions, where these events have come from. They could have come from past life, genealogically, through our ancestors. Invariably, one of the things that sits under the shadow umbrella is inner child work. So things that happen to us, events that happen to us pre-verbal, from conception through birth, and those early formative years. Now, why does it happen then and not later in life? It does happen later in life, but the core of these events happens in that really early stage of life when it's non-verbal, when we're sitting there in a non-dual state. We're not separated from everything. Everything's energy and we're all connected. So your pain is my pain. The child at that young age, 6 months, 1 year, if mummy and daddy having an argument, there's no concept of the argument, the content of the argument. There's the sense, the feeling, the emotion, which is going to be negative in that case, that child is going to take on. Now, how does that emotion sit with them? That could be, it's me, a self-worth issue. It's that seed, that core of the later in life, us not being worthy, developing imposter syndrome, all these things, these behaviors that we present today have this origin in this inner child. Now, you can't just jump back into your inner child because that was pre-verbal. It's not something, it's an event that happened, but it's not an event that you can remember. We'll go on to that work a little bit in a minute. I'll go back to inner child work. So inner child is another area that sits under the umbrella of shadow work. The culture that we live in is another really powerful um, area that has massive impact on how we evolve. We're pack animals. We rely on the group. You know, we spent most of our historic history, humanity's history, has lived tribally. We relied on the group. We grew up on the group. Before we could speak in language, we told stories. The hero's journey is a story that's followed us through through to today, and the latest films being released this year can still be traced their roots back to the hero's journey. So before we were speaking as human beings, we were telling stories, and that's how we communicated in groups, and that influenced our culture, influenced who we are because we wanted to fit in. The worst thing that could happen in a group and a tribe was to be expelled from that group because that was certain death. You were by yourself. So race forward to today, we still live with this unconscious sense of wanting to be part of the group that we're with. So we lose our identity, we lose our authenticity to fit in. The people around me, my parents, their friends are dentists, so I'm going to tend to be a dentist. I support this particular football team because that's the country's football team. So that's who I support. I don't support another country's unless I have a different tie with it, which it's a cultural tie. So our culture fitting in, we change, we suppress, deny our real authenticity, our real identity by working to fit in. And when we're really young, you know, in those early years, when we're starting school, right into our early teens, we really want to fit in. So we suppress, and then we run into unconscious automatic patterns. So we say today that people are asleep. What does that mean? They're asleep because they're running systems, they're just running patterns. The first way to notice what's happening with shadow work is to notice that you're running patterns. And when you're running patterns, let me just check that if it's in the speaker. When you're running patterns, you're doing it unconsciously. So unconsciously, your unconscious is just knowing what is just running what it knows. You drive home, you get there, and you can't remember what's happened as you've driven home. You've run an unconscious pattern. So we say the person is not their behavior. The inner child character that we've developed, those shadows we've taken on, that positive and negative shadows we've taken on, the culture has influenced all of our character, and then we're running on that character automatically. There's other things that can create that can cause us to develop shadows. This is spiritual angle, there's chakras, there's lots of energy work that done right is great, is perfect, but can also create shadows. So that's where they came from. They're our physical, disowned, unconscious personality. It's why we can't reach authenticity. It's why we don't really understand our identity. And um, any serious transformational work, any serious change work has to happen at the identity spiritual level. Most personal development, when people start to step into it, they're running at the level of capabilities and skills. So let's run affirmations, which can have an effect if they touch on the identity, but most affirmations aren't changing our capabilities. And they can have a short-term effect or a long-term effect. It really depends, and everybody's individual. But to get real transformation and real change work, it's at the identity level, at the spiritual level. And this is where shadow work starts to come in, because shadow work is looking at who I am authentically, who I really am before I got all this stuff in my life suppressed, my real identity being suppressed by the culture around me. And most people, they grow old and they die and they never really understand or find out themselves. Midlife crisis. This is another thing. If situation people get into where they look up halfway through their lives and they realize this is not comfortable. I'm not comfortable doing what I'm doing. So they jump from one fry pan into another fry pan because they really don't have access to their identity, to who they really are, their authenticity. And it's not something, personal development, they say, is a journey. This is not something you're going to jump into in a weekend course or a couple of months. It's an extended journey of learning, development, different ways of learning and development. Some of it you do with groups, some of it you do individually, some of it you can do quite simply. Some of it you really need a coach that can really hold the space for you to work through yourself, not create change in you. You change at this level always comes from within. It doesn't come from without, outside somebody doing it to you. So, what are the problems that arise? We've got these shadows. We all have them. Psychology tells us today we have about 4 to 6 core events that have shaped our character. Now, I'm talking here about emotional events. When we're really young, we can't decide if the curtain brushing against the bed when I'm very young is life-threatening. We can't make that judgment. But that state of our evolution, it could be. So we get that fear, it's imprinted onto us, that emotion. So why if you're doing any personal development work, mastering the emotions is early on. It's really important to be able to start to understand. And again, you don't just master your emotions in a weekend. This is an ongoing journey. I was talking to somebody today, and for me, it's evolving enough to be able to notice what's happening and then notice the emotion that's coming, and then being able to deal with it. Observe it, acknowledge, observe it is the most important part, because once you've observed something, you're shining the light on it. And that acknowledges it. And then most of these shadows can be integrated. They're not blocks, they're not things that you're going to have to do some major work on. Most of them are just events that have happened that the unconscious can't decide what's going on. So what it does is it creates this, it doesn't understand it, it suppresses it, it creates a story for itself, and then we behave. So invariably, the presenting issue, something like smoking, is not the problem. And it's easy to stop smoking, or stop smoking. It's easy for someone to have someone stop smoking. But that's not the problem. That's the result, not the cause. So any real change work, transformational work has to happen at the cause level, and that's where we start to approach the identity. So stopping smoking, because what happens is the unconscious is like, I have a problem. I don't understand. I don't know how to deal with it. So if I hold on to a cigarette, it soothes me. So that's the habit that the unconscious has developed because it can't deal with the trauma, the emotional event. Now, that's one level of emotion. Let's call that trauma with a small t. That's emotional events that are significant enough to imprint on us, evolve and change and affect, mold our character, if you like. And they generally happen genealogically, through our history, culturally, when we're really young and in a childhood. Now, they can happen later in life. An emotional event that really strikes a chord emotionally with me. If it's a powerful song that you hear in a situation, your wedding, for instance, say, that's something that's really highly emotive. That song comes on that you've heard before, and you part of your emotional energy hooks onto it. Now, years later, you hear that song, you don't remember the event, but you certainly feel the emotion. It's all about emotions. That's why I said in personal development, emotional work, mastering emotions is something that you need to deal with early on. An event happens and we behave, and the gold is in that gap in between. And the first step is self-awareness. Most of personal development is self-awareness, becoming aware of those emotions coming up, becoming aware of the events triggering you. An event informs you or triggers you. Just to become aware that you've been triggered is a major step forward in self-awareness, self-development. And you can do personal development for years and not know that you're sinking into that self-awareness. I was working with someone a couple of weeks ago who done personal development for decades and still didn't realize when they were sinking into that deep place, that deep place of recognition touching on their identity, touching on who they really were, touching on their authenticity. So it can be somewhere that authentic self can be challenging to find. We get lots of fluff, lots of stuff gets in the way of it. So where do they come from? They kind of come from anywhere. Traumas with a big T are things that when we can process, we can think through something, an event happens, and it's life-threatening. A car accident, going into an operation, having an operation at the hospital. They're traumas that the unconscious knows that they're going to be danger. It's danger. And what they do is they grab a hold of an emotion for that event. Now, shadow work, some therapists, and this is where you need to look at people that know what they're doing, therapists, psychologists, to deal with those major traumas, or shadow workers that can actually deal with those. Shadow coaches, probably shadow coach is not somebody that can really deal with them. So you really shadow work with emotional events, then there's shadow work with major traumas. Two different things. And what I'm going to refer to here, and while I can do trauma with the big T, major traumas there, I will only do those face to face because it takes a lot of energy from myself to hold that space for as long as it takes for the client to understand and decipher and then integrate the trauma. So what we're looking at here is trauma with the small t, significant emotional events, of which we all have these events. These events have happened. Some of us have taken those events, triggered us, and they've supported us and helped us. Other ones have, more of us, these events have happened and they knock our confidence. They create this self-worth issue that we have, these blocks that we now try to deal with when we're 20 or 30, and we're dealing with, if you like, that core event happened in the inner child, and another event happened and there was a layer. So we build up this onion. So in later life, we're trying to do personal development work and we're peeling back the layers. Well, an onion's got a lot of layers. It can take a long time to pull that onion back if we ever do get to that core. So different places that these emotions are going to come from. Problems. So why do shadow work? Why is it a problem? Our shadows are unconscious, but they're still coming out. So the person is not their behavior, but the shadows are being played out in their behavior. An event happens, we're triggered, we behave. How often do you ask yourself, why did I say that before? Why did I do that yesterday? We reacted unconsciously, running on a system that our unconscious is putting through, and that's creating these problems in our behavior. Personal development is about self-awareness, and then you start to become aware of what you're doing. Start to become aware of your behaviors. Real change work happens when you can start to change those behaviors. And you're not going to change the behavior, you're going to put a better, more empowering behavior in place. So when that event happens, your unconscious is going, oh, Christ, I have two options here. I could run that system or that system. Which one is the more emotionally charged? So that new behavior isn't a affirmation or a sentence that I've learned from somewhere or somebody else. It's a quote, say, for instance, it's a quote that has an emotional charge. That improved, more empowering behavior has to have an emotional lead in, because at that level, the event happens, it's the emotion that hooks in first. Is it a powerful, empowering, positive emotion? That's the behavior that's going to result. So we run through this. We don't know what we don't know what we're not doing. So we're unconsciously incompetent. We do a bit of personal development and we become conscious of the fact we don't know what we're doing. So we become consciously incompetent. So I work at a change level that's a transformation level, that is an identity level. I build the emotion into a positive behavior and I become consciously competent. So I know what I'm doing. I'm thinking through the process. You could sort of say this is a bit like faking it till you make it. But that's never really going to work on the longer term. But if we put these powerful, more empowering behaviors in place, they become unconsciously competent. We unconsciously run these systems. So when an event happens, our behavior is going to support us. So when an event happens, we're not going to go, oh, I'm not worthy. An event happens. I live in a friendly universe. An event happens. It happened. Reframing, but unconsciously. So our behaviors are one of the major ones that our shadows are changing. And we evolve and we develop as we get older. The challenge is the problem with our shadows are our our personal problems is that when they're not observed, they get worse. They grow. That which is not observed grows. Carl Jung quote. So if we don't deal with our shadows, our behaviors aren't going to get any better, and they'll usually get worse. One of the other things that happens is that we deny these behaviors in ourselves. So I've been told I don't like to be an extrovert, and I've suppressed that. So I'm an introvert. And I see somebody and I don't like them because they're an extrovert. We're projecting that onto them. They've got their own life, their own energy, their own stuff to deal with. But we've projected what we've denied, we project it and we see it in others. So, and then we'll go on to some of the ways that we work on this. But one of them is to notice when we're being triggered or notice the people that trigger us. And then notice what it is about them that triggers us. And then sit with that triggering. So that person annoys me because they're loud and outspoken, they're obnoxious. It takes a bit of work just to notice, get that far. But then sitting with that and seeing where is this part of me? Okay, so there we're working on acknowledging, recognizing that within me. As within, so without. So it's not their behavior, it's something I'm denying in myself. It's quite powerful to realize that the world's a projection. And the ego does it, the ego does it to protect us. You know, we come into this headspace, we deny our sense, our feeling, our intuition, our gut feel, we deny it, we push it down to protect ourselves in the world. We don't want our emotions to be battered because we live in fear all the time, and that's not a good place to be. We want to evolve up a consciousness level to being love, but a different type of love when you move to a higher consciousness level. Back to when you're being authentic, love means everything is one. Oneness, as I was told today. I'd call it non-duality, non-separation. Triggers are another thing that shows up. So something happens. So it can be an event, it could be somebody or something. It triggers us. And the emotions, anger that comes up, and that's the behavior that comes out. So these triggers can cause us to put too much energy into our reactions. And then we sort of sky up with those, we just start to blow them up and then we're out of control. So it's really fascinating. Let me just turn that. It's really quite fascinating to notice our triggers. It's really quite fascinating to notice our triggers. What it is that pushes me, what pushes my buttons. So let's go on to the next one. Let me just bring this up here. No, we're not going to do an exercise. We're actually going to look at we're going to look now at some of the ways that I work with our shadows, because by acknowledging our shadows, it integrates most of them. And all we're looking to do is shine the light on their shadows so they become part of us, because then they become parts of us that we recognize. We're not suppressing them. We can become a whole. We can become more authentic. And being authentic is bringing all that information in, all that energy into one. So if you like, that energy from our earlier lives is the emotions from our earlier lives is being held there by energy. So today I'm a fractured series of hooks down my life stream, my years of experience. By acknowledging, recognizing, acknowledging them, a lot of them will just integrate in and they won't be shadows anymore. they'll step me towards authenticity. Debbie Ford wrote a book, Recognizing Your Shadows, and she in the book, Deepak Chopra co-wrote it with her. She points out the two easiest, fastest, cheapest ways to do shadow work is meditation and journaling. Why meditation? Meditation, when we start it, it's really hard because our mind's all over the place. We're scattered. We have all these thoughts. The point of meditation is to settle down, is to quieten the mind, lower the frequency. So we're running at a lower frequency where there's less chatter going on. And this allows us the space to contemplate these shadows, to recognize them, to acknowledge them. So meditation, and it doesn't need to be an hour every day, it can be 10 minutes every day. It's developing a habit of quieting the mind down. Especially in today's world, there's so much information hitting us, whether we're on X, whether we're on social media, whether we're watching the news or the radio, and it's all bad news, of course. Don't just lose the television because it's all negative news. All the news channels have an agenda. They want to keep you watching. They're not going to do that by showing you lovely pictures of cows and sheep and dogs and cats. They're going to do it by keeping you in fear. So they show you the COVID results. They show you the Ukrainian war. They show you the elections coming up in the States. They show the fear of the elections in Britain and the right wing coming to power in Europe. It's all about fear. So where you're finding it from, you're watching the TV. So it keeps you suppressed. It keeps your energy suppressed. People that are living in fear, that have lower energy, are easier to manipulate. So turn the television off. How did I get onto that? That's energy. That's our mind is like worried about this. It's got this information coming in. Meditation is a great way just to quieten the mind down so that that the unconscious can then start to deal with these shadows. So, for instance, what you could do is this person yesterday triggered me. They triggered me because I think they're arrogant. Okay, so that's this. So is there arrogance within me? So consciously, no, I'm not arrogant. Meditate on it and see what comes up. But you're not thinking the process. They're not thinking about it. You're just sitting with the meditation. So I'm talking here about non-guided meditation. There's two forms of meditation, broadly speaking. There's guided, which you have a voice telling you that you're going to feel better having listened to the sound of my voice. So that's a guided meditation. The unguided meditation is just where you listen to frequencies, particular frequencies, not just music. So those frequencies and allowing what emerges to come up. If it's the arrogance, the question you asked before, that was at the foremost of your conscious, so it'll be there in the unconscious, and the meditation will allow it to come up. So it will allow you to process through, and really the unconscious wants the space to be able to process this stuff through, but it's got all this other fluff, white noise going on that's keeping us in fear. It's importance of meditation. Journaling is a technique for getting information out of your head onto a piece of paper. Now, this is written, not typeset. In writing, it's cathartic, but it also allows the unconscious to process. So journaling, if you're shadow journaling, you're writing down. So this person triggered me. Okay, so this happened this was the event. This is what happened for me. This is the feelings, the emotions that came up. So you're doing a written meditation effectively. The way I like to understand it is that it's all your brain's all full of this stuff, and writing it gets that piece out of your brain onto a piece of paper, and you have space for more processing to go on. Meditation and journaling are really effective habits to develop. We all have shadows. There'll be layers of shadows. So that initial work will be with the shadows on the surface. As I said, there's half a dozen or so core events. Now, it could take a long time, and there's particular different ways of working with this to get to that core event. There's different ways. The particular way that I use is something called metaphor therapy, allowing the unconscious to develop a metaphorical understanding of that original event, not the event, because you're not going to have access to it. but the unconscious will be able to produce a metaphor because the unconscious works in metaphor and symbolism. So if the unconscious can develop a metaphor, metaphoric landscape, a metaphor for understanding the essence, the energy, the emotion of that event, then it can collapse it. That energy can come back to us. The event still happened, but there's no longer an emotional hook to it. So when I'm working with abuse victims, there can be two results from that. An abuse victim can completely disassociate, so there's no memory of the event. Still all sorts of stuff coming out in their behavior, but there's no memory of the event. Or you talk with other people who will tell you in detail, down to the minus detail of what happened. Because again, they've disassociated into the environment, but they have no emotional contact with it. And again, it's all still being played out in the unconscious, in the behaviors, because the unconscious understands what's happening. It's got this massive emotion that happened that it's pushed down, it's suppressed, and it's trying to keep a lid on. And it's starting smoking because that's the way that it keeps the lid on. And of course, the pressure just grows and grows and grows, and over time, and then it erupts and people blow out. Or people with PTSD, vets coming back from conflict, an event happened and it's just blanked out like an abuse victim. It's just not there. But they can't function in society because their behavior is still being completely evolved and it's completely affected by this event. Now, I think the worst thing you can do is to take a person back to that event, re-traumatize them, because that's not good, re-traumatizing somebody. And the ego is going to fight it because the ego's put this wall up, this protection up, and the ego is going to fight against you trying to go back through it, or even the client trying to go back to that event. It's a protection. It's the way the unconscious believes that we survive. So meditation and journaling are two really effective ways of dealing with it. Now, as we go deeper, and I'm going to share my screen now. As we go deeper, we can look at our archetypes. Now, if you've had anything to do with Tony Robbins, Peter Sage, there's quite a few people doing it now who will talk about the archetypes. Carl Jung developed the archetypes over 100 years ago. And they group the archetypes into labels, other people's labels, of certain characteristics that will come up. So if we look at the archetypes, and there's masculine and feminine archetypes. So we will exhibit certain attributes, characteristics that fall into the archetype in their fullness or its shadows. So obviously, if you think about this, the shadows are the immature archetype. So if I'm being the archetype in the fullness, I'm showing the best positive characteristics. So a leader that's leading. I had a manager of an organization that I worked for a few years ago, and he never sat at the top of the table. There'd be 10 divisional board members there, and he would sit to one side or he would sit halfway down the table. He would never sit at the top. He didn't have the ego to need to be there physically in the presence, just his presence in the room. Okay, so that's an attribute, a characteristic of an archetype in their fullness. Now, if he had sat at the top of the table and let's just say put his hands on, made a noise, put his hands on the desk, he's physically pushing into the room, energetically pushing into the room. So he's not acting in his fullness because he's using force, not power. So he's drifting off the archetype in the fullness, he's drifting towards the shadows. Now, that's not a characteristic of the archetype in their shadow, fully in their shadow. What we all do is we sit somewhere in that triangle there. We might, in certain events happen, we might tend towards our fullness. So with subordinates, we might look after them, we might coach them, we might hold boundaries, but support them and show compassion. And that's, in that particular situation, we're showing an archetypical characteristic in its fullness. Or we might, have other managers that we work with and you undermine them. So you're not being the shadow in its immaturity, but you're tending towards that shadow. So all the archetypes have an active and a passive, positive and a negative pole. And we have masculine archetypes, and we have, where did that go? We have feminine archetypes as well. These are labels that we give, but they're great labels to start to get an idea of our own characters. The danger is that you look at these labels and you say, "Oh, that's me," and you pull out somebody else's definition of your archetypes. What we want to do, so with personal development, when you first start, you're noticing who you're turning up as, who you're turning up as. Working on turning up as your archetype in its fullness is turning up as who you'd like to be. So how you'd like to be seen in the world, how you'd like other people to see you in the world. But that's quite a long way down the line, down the road, down the journey, because at the start here, you're just noticing how you do turn up. And that next step is how people see you in the world. And that's our shadows hold us there. We don't feel good enough. We don't feel worthy. We have imposter syndrome. There's a multitude of individual personal understandings of who we're turning up as. So if you're turning up as the queen in its shadow or the mother in the shadow, what are you actually doing? So again, in journaling, this is something that you could push. This is more than just noticing triggers. This is going on to who am I turning up as? They say the quality of your life is relative to the quality of the questions that you ask. Well, it's not. The quality of the questions that you hold yourself accountable to. So when that event happened, what did I really do? And be honest with yourself. Hold yourself accountable. It's different ways that you can evolve and develop in personal development and evolve and integrate your shadows is by journaling, is by meditation, is by truly being accountable to yourself and noticing who you turn up as. It's really about being honest with yourself. Another thing that we look at is levels of consciousness. The particular one that I look at is values levels. Where do my values sit? So if we look at this spiral here, and this is this is spiral dynamics. This is an integrative evolution as we evolve up the spiral. So I don't want to go into this too much. You can go to university and do a course in spiral dynamics. But what we have here at the lower levels, the beige level, is where we're living at an instinctive level. So when we were living on the plains in tribes, we were in its survival mentality. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy, the very bottom layer of this hierarchy is the survival mode. So homeless people today would be living at this. They're literally living hand to mouth, day to day. And that's what you value. Where am I going to get my next meal from? You're not looking at, am I going to have an argument with the boss about a pay rise? Because that's not where you are. That's not what you can value. You have no tapping into that. So very much about that. So, and then we evolve up these levels to the purple level, which is moving into magical, believing in magic. And we evolve, we absorb these. We can go up and down these levels. It's not like a race to the top, if you like. We go through the red level, the blue level, the orange level, and the green level. This is first tier. So again, I don't want to go into this too deeply because there's a lot to understand in this. What I thought the most effective way here is to ask you some questions. So if you look at this first one, just notice which is the sentence here that resonates with you the most. So an effective leader is the commander leading his warriors to a complete victory over his competitors in the market. Whereas an effective leader, a strategist, someone that observes the corporate policies in order to ensure a harmonious working team. Something about working in a company here. Or as an effective leader, someone who's flexible, they're integrating, they're involving the best specialists in the wider community. They're looking for their qualitative new contributions to the projects. They try to step outside the box a bit. So when you're looking for an answer to these questions, it's the one that senses, that feels the best. Remember, when you're asleep, when you're not into personal development, it's all in the head. You're not noticing the energy, the emotion that's coming up. So feel the right answer. As an effective leader, the father giving protection, supporting his staff. So that manager in a company, that CEO in a company that really protects the staff, supports the staff, they're resolving disputes. They're seen as the authoritative figure. Or even when looking at these questions, imagine somebody in the community that holds these different positions. Or is an effective leader a highly qualified manager using the latest modern technology, AI, or using AI for HR management, using business development? They're using technology to achieve results. Is that something that you're doing? Is that something that resonates with you? Or is an effective leader a peace-loving leader, somebody who's able to create a positive atmosphere in the team, somebody who's giving warmth, support, and this is achieving stable results? All of these can still be effective leaders. It's just which one resonates with you. What we're looking here is which one do you have, which one, and these are all values levels. Yeah. So that an effective leader is a leader that makes decisions for the survival of each and every one in the uniform in the wider community. Is that what you value? Do you value a leader that takes the decisions for the survival of the whole group? Or do you value somebody who looks to modern technology to help HR management, looks to technology to achieve results for business development? These are different. The spiral that I showed you before, these are from different levels. And it's not a race to the top. It's just interesting to see where we sit. Let's go to the next one. I say, which is the most suitable answer here? To manage staff. Is managing staff identifying the levels of the development to create conditions for optimal development for each individual employee, so that it's in a comfortable environment, so they can achieve team results. So is it creating a situation, environment, conditions where teamwork can flourish? Is that managing staff? Or is managing staff creating comfortable environment for the interaction and communication of different people? Resolving disputes and conflicts. Is it about communication? Is that managing staff? Or is managing staff finding and hiring the most motivated professionals, the most talented co-workers, those interested in their careers, growth and development, all working to get projects out, their personal results, but for the company profit? So somebody that's looking to get the best people, support them in their own growth and their development, personal reasons for the company projects, for the company benefit. Is that managing staff? Or is managing staff, do you manage staff according to tradition, rules, regulations? Creating norms. So everybody in the organization, in the company, knows where they sit. It's all laid out for them. They know the unspoken rules and regulations. And this is something that would have been brought down from generation to generation, something that's evolved over time. Or is managing staff unconditional authoritarian leadership in which the status of the boss is never doubted? This is the person that sits at the guy that signs the checks, the one that sits at the top of the table, the authoritarian leader. That's going to sit more comfortably with some people. So which of these ones resonates with you? I mean, we'll spend too much time with that. Cool. So that's another way of working with our shadows. It's noticing what we value. Values levels are really important because they're moving us along. We're evolving. You know, if we're living in this world where we control everything, where my word is law, that's not letting everyone express themselves. So if I'm an employee in that situation, I'm being suppressed by the management. So the culture is pushing me down, and I can either leave or sit in that situation and not be authentic. You know, that's why people change jobs so often. It's why people end up with, you know, sort of dis-ease because of the stress and the burnout they're under, which is getting worse today, especially post-COVID, because people are realizing this is not the world I want to live in. There's something better than, you know, working for the man, putting up with his rules and regulations. But this is really another one of the skills to start helping us understand our values and noticing why this is uncomfortable. It's all about this discomfort. We hate uncertainty. We like to live in certainty. We like to live in a comfort zone, but we also need a bit of spice. We need a bit of uncertainty. So what's holding us back? And it all really comes back to where we started this session. It comes back to our shadows. Because to get over that disease, to be the person I need to be authentic. I need to be all one. I need to be in a non-dual state, oneness. And that's without shadows. And the reason I do this is that we can't carry on like this. We can't carry on with the discord and the dis-ease that's happening in the world. That's about all I wanted to talk about tonight. Where they came from, why we have them, and what we can do about them. Meditation and journaling are really effective ways of starting to tap into noticing what's going on for us. So you do the personal development work. If it's Tony Robbins, Peter Sage, I run courses with Peter Sage. That's that first step. But you need to quieten the mind down to actually start to internally process, to take the stuff on board, because it's all about the core. The most important thing you can do is to start to get back to this heart-mind coherence. And the challenge with all that is that there's these blocks that come up, these shadows of things that we've denied. So we're not being whole. We can't be authentic unless we've got most of us back within. We've recognized that there's parts of me that I've been suppressing. So if you're interested, I will send an email out next week. I'm about to launch a training. It will happen actually not this month. It'll happen next month, which is going into these different areas of evolving, integrating, and recognizing and acknowledging our shadows. This is a big part of journaling and meditation, but we also start to look at the archetypes. And the first step of archetypes, as I said, was noticing who you're turning up as, but then proactively, who do I need to turn up as? You're starting a new job. You never get a first chance, another chance, a second chance to make a first impression. So before you go in, creating that archetype, who I need to be. And the worst thing you can do is take that stressed, burnout archetype, who you're being at work, take it home to the family. It's not going to help the relationships with your partner, with your children. So we look at the archetypes and who you're turning up as, and then create who you need to be. And then we go on to the values level there that we just discussed, the spiral dynamics, integral theory. And notice how we react when somebody's triggering us, remembering it's a projection. It's not them, it's something they're doing that we recognize it's something they're doing that we recognize within ourselves unconsciously. So integral theory looks at actually confronting that emotion, not the person, actually, confronting the emotion. And most of shadow work is just acknowledging. Confronting is the wrong word. It's acknowledging and facing up to that emotion, because all these shadows, well, the unconscious doesn't know how to deal with it. Once you give it the space, meditation, you get the words out to journaling, the unconscious can start to evolve and develop a metaphorical landscape of understanding. All my work is underpinned by something called clean language, which is not using rude words. It's me not imposing my stuff onto your system, because your unconscious is a system, and it's the only system that can sort out in its own power an answer to the challenges, to those shadows that you've got. Your own system is the only thing that can change at a spiritual identity level. You can be guided, and certain things, certain interventions can tap into it, but it really all comes down to your unconscious sorting this crap out for itself. So if that's something you're interested in, drop me an email, drop me a line, and I will send this course out that I'm running. It will start early August. Maybe I'll leave it till after the holidays. A 6-week course, I include coaching in that one-to-one coaching because there's certain blocks. This stuff we deny, we suppress it. It's unconsciously there. We don't have access to it. We can sit there in meditation and not notice it. We can be triggered and struggle to recognize what the trigger is on emotion and on an emotional level. So some shadow work can be done yourself. Some shadow work needs the right coaches to do it, the right shadow workers to do it. My name's John Farrell, and I'm an emergent knowledge trainer. I'm an EMF trainer. I'm a shadow coach. I've been a coach for over 20 years. The process that I'm using is actually something I co-developed with the originator of Clean Language. So I hope that's been informative. If you're interested, I might do this again in a month or so. Been great to see you all here. There's a few people on Facebook. And there's a few people here. If there's any questions, you can put them in the chat. Let me have a look on Facebook. Let me just check. Nope, no, there's nothing on that one. I'm actually on a couple of Facebooks. And drop me a line as well, because a lot of this stuff goes on to my Facebook page. All right. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll hear from you soon. Bye for now.